writing a function rule. So a function rule is basically your equation. Okay, it's kind of like when we solve an equation, you have x plus 3 equals 5. The x plus 3 portion, okay, that's your function rule. That basically says, hey, this is what you're using. You have to find out the x's and the y's. Okay, you have to do this every time. So, like to your x, you have to minus 3 every time. That's the rule. That's what you have to do. Okay, so I'm going to throw a couple things at you that you haven't seen before. But the reason I want to get those out there is so you've seen them, you've heard of them. So when we hit this portion this year, you guys have already seen this stuff and you kind of know what it looks like. Okay, so with the function rule, the one thing that we want to remember is it looks like slope intercept form. And you might be like, whoa, what the heck is that? We'll get to that in a later portion. I just want you guys to have seen this, okay, and kind of have an idea of it. All right, so your function rule is going to look something like this. Y equals mx plus b. Okay, so what this basically means is this portion here, this y, this is kind of like my f of x. If you remember with our functions, we always had f of x equals something. Okay, it was like f of x equals 2x plus 9 when x is 7. And we just substitute and solve. Okay, so this portion of y is basically your f of x. Okay, this number in front of x, okay, we call that slope. Okay, and slope, what this basically is, okay, this is the change in y over the change in x. So when I give you an xy chart, okay, I tell you to write a function rule, all right, change in something means we're going to subtract it. We're going to find out how this changes, all right? So that's why this portion is important. I know this looks complicated, okay, but once we do some examples, I promise you it'll make a lot more sense to you, all right? And, excuse me, my last portion here, this B, this is what we call the y-intercept. All right, and the y-intercept, there's only one rule to remember, okay? It's when x equals 0. And I want you to put a box around the x equals 0. So when I give you a chart, when x is 0, whatever y is, when x is 0, goes right there. I promise you it's that simple, okay? So I give you guys a second to get that down, kind of process it, soak it in, all right? Everybody good? All right, let's look at our first example here. So your example is going to say something like this. Write a function rule from the table. And it's going to give you a table, okay? So write a function rule from the table. And let's say our table, we're going to have x, y. And let's just say I have -1, 0, 1, 2. We'll just keep it simple here. And 5, 1, -3, -7. All right, so we're going to write a function rule from the table. Okay, and this is a table that we've been given. So our function rule, okay, is going to look like, remember that what we wrote down a second ago. It's going to look like this. Y equals mx plus b. Okay, But the way we can think about it is we can think about this as f of x equals mx plus b. Okay, so the first thing we're going to find, okay, we're going to find the m. All right, so step one, we're going to find our slope. Okay, so find m. All right, which is the change in y over change in x. All right, so it's the first thing we do. So let's look at our y's here. And we're just going from number to number here. All right, what happens when I go from 5 to 1? Well, we're subtracting 4. Okay, well, what happens from 1 to negative 3? Again, subtracting 4. Noticing a pattern? All right, a pattern is a good thing. Okay, so from negative 3 to negative 7, again, we're minusing 4. So my change in y, okay, my change in y is negative 4. It's my constant pattern. We're subtracting 4 every time. Over, well, what's my change in x? Let's go back and let's look at our x's here. Okay, negative 1 to 0, what happens? Well, we're adding 1. From 0 to 1, again, adding 1. And from 1 to 2, we're adding 1. Well, what happened there? We're adding 1. Okay, so my pattern is plus 1 or just 1. So my change in x is 1. Okay, so negative 4 over 1. Now you don't have to have it as a fraction unless you can't reduce it. Now, negative 4 over 1 can it reduce? Yes. What's it reduced to? Well, it just reduces to negative 4. Okay? So if I look at my f of x equals mx plus b, let's just write that kind of over to the side. What I like to do is once I find something, okay, let's just plug it in. So negative 4 is my m, so I'll plug that in right here. So negative 4x. So that part's done. Okay, I only have one more part to find. What is that part? It's your slope intercept. What do we remember about slope intercept? I promise y'all it's that easy. My slope intercept, this part is just when x equals 0. Does x equal 0 anywhere in our table here? It does, right here. So what's y when x is 0? Okay, y is positive 1. So step 2, all right, what we're going to do here is we're just going to find the y-intercept, or where x equals 0. We found that x is 0, y is 1. What type of 1 is it, positive or negative? Well, it's a positive 1. Okay, so for this example, all right, my function rule is negative 4x plus 1. Okay, and that is what we would use to find another point. So for example, if I said, all right, class, you found your function rule, what's y when x is 7? All right, I didn't give you an equation or anything, but you have the function rule. Okay, so you would go here, you go, okay, with x is 7, I got to find y. All you're going to do with that 7 is you're going to substitute it in your equation, which would be negative 4 times 7 plus 1. That's going to be negative 28 plus 1. It's going to be negative 27. So it'll be negative 27. So we could find any number on our graph, okay, or our chart, all right, just by using my function rule that I wrote, okay. So if you use slope intercept form, again, I know that's a lot, okay, don't get stuck on that, all right, just get stuck on the pieces that we have to fill out. We just have to find our change in y, our change in x, so you're just finding how those x's and y's change, okay, sub them in over here, all right, and then we're finding our slope intercept, which is when x is 0, looking for a 0 on x, okay, and if you don't have that 0, then you have to find it. Okay, so we're going to do one more example. And on this example, we're not going to have the 0. So I'm going to show you guys an example of how to find that. All right, so here's our second example. right, we're going to write a function rule again. I'm going to give you the chart here. So we're going to avoid the all the directions. So let's say I have for my x's 2, 4, 6, and 8. And for my y's, -11, -8, -5, and -2. So we think about our steps here. All right, step 1, okay, we're going to find m. We're going to find the slope. And how do we find that? So changing y over the change in x. So there are my function rule out here. F of x equals mx plus b. I'm just going to fill these parts in as we go. Okay. So my change in y, I'm looking at these points, how they go from point to point. -11 to -8, we're adding 3. Okay. -8 to -5, we're adding 3. -5, -2, we're adding 3. That one can be confusing. You might be like, well, Mr. Reed, the numbers are getting smaller. Are we subtracting? You can think about a number line. Okay. And if you get confused with that, okay, I can just take, well, -11 minus -8. All you do is you subtract these two to get what your pattern is. Okay. We just subtract those. All right. So we're adding 3 each time. Okay. My pattern X, 2 to 4, well, we're adding 2. 4 to 6, we're adding 2. 6 to 8, we're adding 2. So my change in y is 3. My change in x is 2. So that'll be a fraction, 3 over 2. So if I fill that in for m, 3 over 2x, that part's done. All right, if you remember step 2, okay, we're going to find when x equals 0. That's my y-intercept. Okay, we're going to find that x equals 0. Now, this particular problem, there's no 0. Okay, so how do we find 0? We're going to use the pattern for slope to work backwards. Okay, so we use our pattern or our slope to work backwards. All right, so what I mean by that is, okay, if we're going this direction and we're adding 2 each time for x, when I work backwards, instead of adding 2, now I'm going to subtract 2 because we're going the opposite direction. Okay, so what's 2 minus 2? That's 0. So that means that the next time I go my y coordinate, this should give me my y-intercept. So again, if I'm moving this direction, I'm adding 3 as I go down. If I go in the opposite direction, okay, we're going to subtract 3. So then -11 minus 3 is -14. Does x equal 0 here? Yes. What's my y coordinate? -14. So again, we're going to use our sign to determine our operation. I'm not going to write plus. I'm just going to write -14. And that is your function rule for this chart. Okay? All we're doing is we write this down here and fill your parts in. You can write your function rule. Okay?